Okay, so let's get started with our next program. Friends, in our previous development, we have seen a lot about props and also about events and how to collect the data from the client. That also we have seen. But another important step I would like to discuss here is along with the props, which is actually called as a what? Read only. Okay, it cannot be changed, but data can change. Okay, it cannot remain constant, it keep changing. Just imagine a use case. You are having a Facebook account or Instagram account and you upload any picture or some post, and you have a lot of friends over the social media, and everybody will see your post and they will start reacting. So the moment you upload your post, you have a zero number of likes, but over the period of time that likes will automatically increase. Okay, so those likes which were earlier 5, now it is increased to 50, then later on it increased to 60 or 70, or number of users, those who will review or see, they will start giving the values, or you can say their reactions to your post. So your state will keep on incrementing or decrementing, depends on what kind of post you've added it. So the state is something which is not about what post you uploaded, but how many posts you've uploaded it, what are the posts you deleted. So the entire application level states, you have called multiple different type of states are available in the React application. So state is nothing but a call object in React, okay, which can change. Okay, now I would like to give you the brief idea about how the state can work and how to utilize this state into your code. But remember one thing, when you talk about state, it has 3 ways. Okay, 3 steps process, I will say. Number 1, about the state management, we say called initialize. Okay, we talk about what? Initialize the state. That is the point number 1. And second, we talk about call after initializing, we say render the state. Third, after this rendering, we talk about updating the state, because the state will update, and after this updating, once again you are rendering it. That's how you're trying to do. So let's try to understand how this state can be implemented in your current code. I will add another component inside my application called counter.js. Okay, let me close all the files, and here in my counter.js, okay, I would like to develop something very basic example where I would like to initialize my state. So here what I do is, just like in header, I'll copy the same, and in my counter I'll place it. Here give the name called counter, and I remove this. Here I will develop 3 different type of buttons. Okay, one is called increment. Okay, and this increment button will be calling our function here called increment. Here I will say log let's put it in a single quotes, and I will call it using equal to increment. Likewise, I can also have decrement, and this decrement will have a log again, where we're saying called copy this button and paste it, and we'll say decrement. Okay, we have a call increment and we have a call decrement. So 2 options we are having it now. So this counter.js, I would like to add it in my app.js. So rather than main app, I say counter, and let's check the final outcome. Okay, here it is, increment. Let's check it out here. Increment is called decrement is called. Okay, it's working perfectly fine. Well, that's not my main task. My main task is to talk about state. So I would like to initialize my state, and as per my process I told you, we need to initialize my state. Okay, and how to initialize my state? Here I will go and say state equal to count colon 0. So I've created my state object. There's a predefined name state, and there's a one property called count. This can be anything, and I've initialized my value with 0. And this is how I initialize my state. In order to render this, I will say counter is, and here I will say this dot state dot count. This is how you initialize this. Oh, sorry, this is how you render the state. This is initialization and this is rendering. This dot state dot count, and let's check. You see, I've got a value 0 because I've initialized with my 0. If I say 10, you see it is initialized with 10. Quite easy, isn't it? So you are initializing the state and you are rendering the state. The next step will be, after this initializing the state, you would like to update the state. So the question is how you would like to update the state in your code. So you will be writing some logic here in case if you would like to update. Yes, you can. So what you can do in case if you would like to update the state. So in order to update the state, we would like to create a one function. Okay, and I'll be calling it here. So this is my increment function. So this increment will be called the moment my application will start calling this increment button. So here, since it is a console.log, the value which is, so here in this increment, in order to update the state, I will say this dot state dot count equal to this dot state dot count plus 1. Okay, and we are printing this with the log by saying this dot state. So this increment will do what? It will take the value, let me put it to 0 again, and it will increment by 1, and I'm logging my current state into my application. So now here when I refresh, now if I just say increment, you see it is saying cannot read the property reading state, because this function is taking care about the state. So let me make this as a what? As an arrow function. And now let's go back and check. Yeah, you can see, I can see this incremented value called 1. And once again I say increment, you see the value is called 2 is printing. Again the value is 3 is printing. Okay, that's quite nice. I can see the state is changing. But the biggest challenge what I can see is this state is actually getting called increment. I'm incrementing the state, okay, and I'm printing in my log. My log is getting updated, okay, but the browser is not getting updated. The browser is not showing the latest update what we are actually planning to show to the user. This is something which I would like to handle, and in fact I want to handle this. So here is a small challenge. Look, React is using one tool name called, okay, so React uses one tool here called virtual DOM. Virtual DOM is an idea in which the DOM, when it is getting rendered back to the client, behind in memory it contains the exact copy of the DOM whatever has been rendered back to the client. So later on, if any changes happens, your virtual DOM identifies, okay, only this property has changed, so only those properties has been applied to the DOM with the new changes rather than repainting the entire DOM. See, repainting the entire DOM gonna be quite expensive and time consuming and degrade the performance. Virtual DOM helps to create a one memory, okay, between what has been rendered and what is there. So it contains the exact copy of what has been given to the client. So later on, if any changes happens, it knows it very well what changes has to be sent it to the client rather than sending the entire DOM. That is something which really cool feature of the React. I just show you about an idea here. If I just give you the virtual DOM, React will get to know in these images. See, this is what we have, this virtual DOM. So virtual DOM is something which knows it very well what changes has been done, okay, and it changes the state, identify the difference and made only those changes visible to the client rather than repainting the entire DOM. This is what the React follows the practice internally, okay, to identify which portion needs to be updated rather than resending the entire DOM back to the client. Okay, so here, due to that reason only, here the changes are made, okay, when I say like this.state.count plus 1, your application is not identifying those changes, okay, which result for repainting the DOM with the new values. Okay, so this changes are not applicable to the browser because the state, whatever we are making it, it is changing the values, but your browser is not able to identify those changes internally behind the scene, because in case if you want the changes to be made available, remember one thing, React have got lifecycle function. Those lifecycle function get called on certain period. There's a one lifecycle function which is available here called component did mount. This will get called when the component is loaded in a memory. So if I just say log and I say loaded, but it calls only once, loaded only once, and whenever the state is changed, whenever the changes are happened behind the scene, it calls a function called component did update. Component did update will get called every time when the state has been updated. So here in my log, I'm saying called on every update. So now here the changes are happening every time when the state is updated. But here what is happening, if I just go back to my browser and here you see load only once. Okay, you might be thinking why it is getting called twice. It is getting called twice because in React, whenever you're rendering the component, by default index.js is using this tool called react.strict mode. So just to dual check the values of your properties to avoid any kind of challenges at last minute, it is using react.strict mode. What you can otherwise use the typical div tag instead of this. And now if I refresh, you see it is loaded only once. And after that, if I say increment, you see count is incrementing, but the lifecycle function, okay, this is actually lifecycle functions of your React component, it is supposed to be get called. So these are basically the method which will get automatically called on certain situation on each and every component. And you see here this component did update is not getting called despite the state is changing, and we have to fix that. Okay, so this will get called only when you are internally calling which function set state. So remember, if you're updating a state, this should be only called using set state, because if you do not call set state, your virtual DOM won't be able to detect those new changes. Due to that, those changes would not be applicable to the browser. So this won't really help you. So in case if you would like to make those changes available to my browser, so you have to use set state function. So what you'll be doing now, so rather than using this, I'll call this dot set state is a predefined. Here I'll take the previous state. It is a once again not a predefined variable parameter which you are passing it. You can give any name, however it contains what is my previous state. Like if it is 0, it will hold the 0 value. If it contains 10, it will hold a value called 10. So here I'll say return, and inside my return I say count colon previous state, whatever the previous state it is, and it takes this count property and increment to what 1. So this is how it is updating the state. And now once it's updating the state, you can see the values are updated in your where? In your browser. Okay, and also the lifecycle function is also getting called. Let's check this out. You see, loaded only once, and let's call increment. Awesome, you can see the values is being printed in a browser. At the same time, this event is also getting triggered. See, it is getting triggered every time when the updates are happening. So the set state is the one which instruct to your virtual DOM is this is what the value has been updated, and now you go and update it value in your browser. So I'm sure that we are clear about how we are providing this state back to our client to check whatever the changes needs to be get updated here. So this is the basic principle which we have followed it up. So the same thing, if I want to deal with the decrement portion, how will I do this? So in your decrement, I'll call, this is the way we have a call, increment. I'll copy the same, logic, whatever I've written it here, and pasted it here, and change to -1, and call this decrement the way it is available here. Okay, and check incrementing. Now once again it is saying the same challenge, because I have to make this function once again as an what? As a arrow function, because it is required for each and every function whichever is taking care about the state. You must have to have this arrow function, otherwise you have to bind this function manually under the constructor of this class, which is once again a lengthy process. So the shortcut process is always to have this arrow function if and only if your functions are taking care about your state. If it is a normal function, if it is not manipulating the state, certainly you can avoid using arrow function, but it's good to have this arrow function because it's going to be benefiting you a lot in our upcoming examples. So you see, you're incrementing, and here it is decrementing. So that is initial way of how the state management is taken care. It is a simple way of how the props and states works together, okay, to get your job done.